Randy to introduce himself.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Randy Hill, and I'm the newest member of the State Historic Preservation Office. Been here a couple months. If you've had a grant in the past, you probably worked with Christy Moore, and she retired last fall. But even though I don't come from this field, I'm one of those people that, when they got off from work, they went home and worked on old houses. So I do have a good bit of experience. And I recognize a couple familiar names I've spoken with already on the phone. So looking forward to going through the information with you. And like Claire said, if you have questions, we'll cover all those when we get to them.
And then I'm Claire Tryon. I'm the planning and education coordinator for our office. I don't deal with development grants directly, other than I help to organize all of our educational efforts, including those around our different financial assistance programs. And then Susan.
Hello, my name is Susan Wood, and I am the GIS technician here, but I also help get all the information into the office for grants and other applications we have. So I'm going to talk today about GoApply, which is our new online portal. Don't be afraid, it's nothing too crazy, but I'll help you along with that if you have any questions. Thanks. All righty, accessing GoApply. I'm gonna change to I'm gonna share my screen, work this out. All right, is everyone seeing the our home page for the West Virginia Department of Arts, Culture, and History?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to go over here and navigate to the grants page, and this is a good place to start if you're ready to submit your application or learn some more things. That's for sure. It's under grant opportunities here under historic preservation, the third one down. So click that and open up the page. A lot of good information here. And at the bottom, we have GoApply. We have click here for the GoApply online application portal, create a login, get started. We also have our user guide here. And here it talks about, we have two types of accounts. We have individual accounts and organizational accounts. And a individual account is automatically approved and you're ready to go. But if you have a organizational account, I have to verify it. We have that level of security with these accounts. So, and I'm here Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and I usually get right to it and activate your account. And won't take very long. And also, if you have any questions, please send me an email or give me a phone call. Give me a call, and my information will be at the end of this presentation. So let's go ahead and you can click here, or you can actually click the graphic. So let's go ahead and we're gonna. All right, here's the online portal. And some of you might have an account with this here or not. Let's open up here to create a new account, just sort of what you're going to be looking at. And like I said, there's two things. You're individual or you're an organization. And let's do the individual. Very great. Just your first and last name, your email, confirm email, and your passwords you're going to use, and then you register. Always keep track of your password. You can reset it. If you go back here did you forget password? But it's right here, you can reset it. And let's go back and look at the new account for an organization. And you might ask, what would I need an organization if you've got other people possibly working on your grant and you want to help, they need to help and they need to see the process that's going through and help you with questions or anything like that, you can have someone. And let's go over here to organizations. You can search our list of organizations if it's in here, and if not, you can skip it, manually enter them. And if you are working with someone and they already have an organization account set up, then you should know this information here. You know, you don't need the tax ID, just the name and the address, and it will match. And then like I said, I'll go in and activate that. But like I said, give me a call or an email if you've got any questions. All right, so I'm gonna jump in here, and I got a whole bunch of accounts here. Let's jump to this one, test accounts. And let's do sign in. And there it goes. All right. And if you've got no in progress or submitted applications, it's going to drop right up to opportunities. We have 5 right now. And the second one is the 2026 State Development Grant application. And to get into the application, you click view. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but click view. But if you needed to go back to read more on the web page I was just on, that's what that link here. We've got Randy's information here and the due date. So let's do view. Going to, this is the information page. Just a little bit of background on the page, you know, on the grant, and can lead you to the National Register of Historic Places to see if your property is on it. And we've got the go apply deadline, and that's March 31st at 11:30, and that is a Monday. Ooh, all right. And if you're going to do an organizational count, don't wait until like Saturday to set up, because I'm not here on Saturday. So let's get in there early. We've got a couple of options here. You can print a blank, and that's just for you to have a see what's the questions are going to be, can help you along with any questions you have. Not sure where that's going to go. And then here it is, gives you that. Let me get out of the Zoom here. And then we're going to come back to apply. This is when you're going to start your application. Okay. And the very first question we ask is your property listed on the National Register of Historic Places? You guys are probably yes. And we've got lots of questions here. Probably go through them. Just want to let you know about this first page here. We've got a signature. It's not going to be a pretty signature because you're going to be doing it with your mouse. So as long as we get something in there, it's legible, and we're going to have you type in your name again there in the date. So, and let's go on to the next page. And we also have an index here on the site. So we're going to go through the checklist, the first one, then the owner sponsor count that you can follow through where we're going. And let's find a question where you have to upload. Okay, so here on the details, when you talk about your project, and also want to put here on this second question, location, character limit is 500, not 2,000. We just had a little snafu. It wasn't going through because it was really long. So just have something brief there for the location. We could. Okay, and when it's a red asterisk, it means it's required. Like here's the county, pick one of the West Virginia counties, there's 55. And so here's one here, provide at least 3 current letters of support. And just to give you a little overview of what's happening, in each of the fields where you upload, it's only going to be one document. Maybe you've got it combined and you've got a few, maybe you've got all the letters in one of the fields, and that's fine. In one of the PDFs, that's fine. But what you'll do is you'll go in and let's see, I've got a National Register nomination here, and I found it on my computer. It's in my downloads, and just click. Oh, it seeds the 1 meg. There you go. Let's see here. Let's find one that doesn't. Can't see what's going on here. Okay. Okay. I've got my thing I'm working for. It's pretty simple. Just goes right in there. You can tell that you've got something in there. It gives you the name of it. And also remember, the labeling documents helps you, this PDF says the name of it. It just helps you know what's in there. And if you need to clear it, it gives you the prompt if you want to clear it or not. We'll just keep that in there. But yeah, pretty basic. Like I said, only one. We have 1 meg size limitations, PDFs. Let's see here. And that's about it. The on the very last page, there is a federal form that's required. We've got a link to it here, and the assurances. Then you scroll all the way down to the bottom. That's where the submit button is. If you've got any problems with submit, let me know. Okay. Okay.
Hey, Susan, on saving, when I've played around in here, I haven't noticed it timing me out, but how often should people save?
Timing you out. Just, it's always a good maybe every step you take, go down in the good question. It's the save draft. I haven't noticed any timing out either. Just go ahead and, save your draft because maybe you need to come back. So let's X out of here. Let me get out of here.
And I have noticed, if you save something, you can always go back and edit it. It's not like you permanently saved it because that doesn't happen until you hit the submit button.
Exactly. So we've been working on this one and say, let's go. We're finished this for now. We're going to come back tomorrow, and your in progress will have it right here. You've got the date here that we just closed it. So it's like, oh, okay, let's come back here and start working again on it. Maybe you've got some answers to a couple of questions, and so we're back at page 4, the budget, and the description is just really going to be text, right? So it will make some room for you here. You could, so pretty user friendly, but and if you've got zero amounts in some of the dollars, go ahead and put in 0.00. So it was having an issue with that last year a little bit, but who knows what could come up, but just let us know, let me know, and I will help you get this over the finish line. Thank you. Stop sharing. Okay.
So getting started, you should understand some of the allowable activities for what we fund through the development grant. We have generally 5 categories that projects fit into. Each of these categories are used to ensure that the historic integrity and character of a building is maintained. The first of which is preservation, which means applying measures to sustain the existing form, integrity, and materials of a historic property. This could look like in-kind repairs to your existing window sashes to ensure that you're maintaining the craftsmanship of the window. We also have protection, which is guarding a property from deterioration or taking measures to shield the site from damage. Usually these are temporary and in preparation for future preservation efforts. An easy example would be the replacement or updating of gutters to ensure water is being directed away from your building. We then have rehabilitation, which is creating a compatible use for a property while still conveying its historic, cultural, and architectural value. Rehabilitation introduces new changes to the building while also not interfering with the historic look. We're primarily considered with the exterior of buildings. So this would be like in Charleston, the YWCA wanted to have an addition, so they put the structure behind the pre-existing building and connected the two with a hyphen, and this is, a reversible change that could occur. We then have restoration, which is accurately depicting the form, features, and character of a property as it appeared in a particular time period. And removal of later additions and the reconstruction of missing features. I can't think of an example off the top of my head. I might pass that over to Meredith real quick, but.
A restoration. So say, for example, taking a building that has had alterations in the past that are maybe from the 80s or the 90s. They're not necessarily historically important. Maybe it has like a new porch roof and you want to restore the historic porch roof that you have photos of from, the 1890s. That would be an example of restoration.
Thank you, Meredith. And then finally, we have stabilization, which is reestablishing the physical stability of a deteriorated resource while maintaining the existing context and integrity. So this would be, addressing any issues to like a deteriorating foundation. Projects often accomplish more than one type of allowable activity. There is some work that wouldn't be appropriate for the use of development grant funding. For example, if you were to replace what we would refer to as character defining windows on the facade of your house with vinyl replacements, or you have a slate roof and you want to put in like asphalt green shingle. These measures would provide protection, but they wouldn't maintain the integrity or the existing materials of the historic house. We'll work with you to ensure that appropriate work is being done throughout the grant process. All right. This brings us to our guidelines for development funded projects. As I was just discussing, project work must meet the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, meaning the work must maintain the historic integrity of a property. These standards are available online, and they are essentially cover the allowable activities we just discussed. And again, our office will help you to meet these standards. All projects must meet labor standards, and when applicable, the prevailing wage requirements in standard form 424D, i.e. the Davis-Bacon Act. This doesn't typically apply because development grants are considered state funded, and West Virginia repealed its Prevailing Wage Act in 2016, but if a project is also receiving federal funds like through HUD, then the prevailing wage requirements do apply. Also, all projects must adhere to the Civil Rights Act, Rehabilitation Act, and ADA requirements. These acts also are aligned with specific federally funded projects. Contractors will still have to comply with, wage labor laws like minimum wage and overtime. You will have to comply with our state's competitive bidding and purchasing requirements. Competitive bids are required, so grantees must advertise and hold a mandatory pre-bid meeting. There is no minimum number of bids that you are required to accept. No minimum number of bids, and you are not required to accept the lowest bid if there is justification to accept a higher bid. And we'll help you throughout that process. The winning contractor is not required to have a bond for the project. This is required for some state procured construction projects elsewhere. It's unlikely this will come up during your projects, but it's important to remember that projects will have to comply with 18 USC 1913, meaning that you can't use these funds for lobbying activities. And again, we don't anticipate that being a problem here. Randy, you need to unmute yourself.
I knew I'd do that. Susan went over, showed you what the Go Apply application looks like. And I know a bunch of you have already been in there and been working on your draft. But we're going to go through each section and give you some examples and talk about them in detail. And by the way, in case you're wondering why we're calling this the 2026 grants, it's because we follow the state's fiscal year. So these grants, the time frame for them will be July 1st, 2025, and then the end date would be June 30th of 26. That's the fiscal year. So the application starts out with a checklist, and this helps you to understand what all is going to be required as you go through it. And some things you can go ahead and check off, but you'll actually come back to it as you complete your application to make sure you've got everything in. And the first thing is that to qualify for a development grant, the property has to be listed in the National Register of Historic Places. And by that, it does not have to be individually listed, although some properties are because they're very significant. But the majority of the properties that apply for a development grant are within a historic district. So if you're familiar with Charleston, we have the East End Historic District. And so that's what you'll actually reference the name of the historic district or the name of the historic property in the application. And then I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here because it's just a checklist. We'll get into the details as we go into each section. But we get a lot of questions about letters of support and what does that mean? And some people will say, do I have to open my property to the public, so they can take tours or something? And we do want letters showing there is public support, but you do not have to open your property to the public. Many of our grants are for private residences or business places that aren't just the public's not going through. The letters of support can be from anyone. They're often from if you have a Historic Landmarks Commission, if you can get a letter from your city council person, but basically we just want letters that clearly show the work and that's to be planned, and that the person writing the letter is in support of the grant funds to complete that work. Sometimes a letter is a paragraph long, sometimes it's 3 pages long, just clear and concise. If you have questions about the letters, a couple people have asked me, can you give me some examples? And I've shared those. I'll be glad to do that. It doesn't hurt as you start working on your application to go after your letters first. The majority of the application, you're in control of filling it out. And if you want to stay up late, you can get it done. You can't necessarily get somebody to write a letter for you at the last minute. So I encourage you to get the letter started early. Sometimes people will say, can you kind of draft it for me and then I'll tweak it, so anything that you can do to help get those letters in, it's a good idea. And you're going to have more than 3, but you have to have at least 3. The contractor's estimate, it does have to be within the last 2 months. And some people got an early start. And so I talked to somebody recently and they're going to have to go back to their contractor. And I don't think anything in the estimate was going to change. It hadn't been that long, but by the time they submit their application, it'll be more than 2 months old. So they just need to update that date. The deed, you do have to submit a copy of the deed with your application. And if the person who's applying for the grant is not the property owner, you'll also have to have a letter from the property owner showing that they're aware of and they support the application for the grant. And then there's places, as you're describing the work that you're wanting to complete through the grant, you're required to submit photographs. As Susan mentioned, you're limited to 1 megabyte when you upload these documents. So we have a few little tricks that you can use to take advantage of some other areas that you might not be needing to be able to upload more photographs, but try to make sure that you are at least providing a photograph of the specific area that you're wanting to work on, and then it's clear and lighted as good as possible so that we can see the work that you're wanting to do. And then also proof of funds. We'll get into that more as we get into the matching funds section of the application. All right. The historic name. In a bunch of this section about the owner, the sponsor, the contact is pretty straightforward. So I'm not going to go into every single data field, but the historic name would be the name of the individually listed property or resource or the historic district. So if you're not sure about that, Susan mentioned that she works with our GIS mapping. And so if you haven't been on that map before, you can find your property or the listing of the district. And it's kind of like a rabbit hole, because once you start poking around there, you'll find it pretty interesting. You'll start pulling up properties to look at them and do some research. But if you're not sure, we can also help you if you can't find it. Information about the property owner, the grant sponsor, and the contact person, those are usually the same person, but sometimes larger projects, they might have a project manager who's going to be administering the grant as opposed to the actual property owner. And one thing I ran into recently was the checks are actually like reimbursement checks. As you complete work and you submit an invoice to be reimbursed through the grant, those are mailed to the grant sponsor. So you want to make sure that you know, if you're picky about who's going to receive that check and where it's going to go, you want to make sure that person is identified as the sponsor. And then getting into the parts of the application, the project name, and that could be whatever you choose. Often people use the property address. Sometimes a house will have a name, Elmwood or Cedar Grove. So, you know, whatever you choose, but that's what we will, you know, for tracking purposes, we use that name of the grant. The level of support, we talked about the letters of support, but in this section is where you can describe the level of support. Some properties already have really strong community support through fundraising efforts, volunteer groups. You know, if it's a private residence, it's a little trickier. You know, your letters of support may have to do with, you know, it's one of the contributing properties in your district, and you know, your neighbors might be the ones who are writing your letters of support. If you have questions about, like, you know, like I said, you don't have to open up your property for tours, but you want to describe how this contributes to the overall district and how the public benefits from it. And then how does the resource fit into the history of the community? And this is where you have the opportunity to describe, you know, you may know some interesting facts about the property, who built it, who's lived there. Many times properties have been used for different purposes over the years. So, you know, you can summarize that. If you aren't sure, if you haven't already looked at the inventory sheet that was completed when the property was listed, many times those historical facts are available in those sheets. So you could access that GIS map to see that. There's 3 links to upload the letters of support. And you can also upload other supporting documents like newspaper clippings or articles that might have been written about the property. In order to try and like make the maximum use of your uploads, you could scan all 3 letters into one document and upload. That would just be one upload. And then in the application where it says upload letter number 2, that's where you could use that to upload maybe the newspaper clipping or the other documentation that you want to send to us. And continuing on with the details section of the application, who's going to be responsible for administering the grant and what's their experience. You don't have to be a professional grant writer or have experience in writing grants. If you've already looked through this application and if you're familiar with other grants, you'll probably see that this is a pretty straightforward, pretty simple and short application. Many people who apply for the grant just explain that, you know, either through their career or even just managing their household, they have experience in, you know, keeping track of invoices and payments and, you know, keeping track of the project, making sure it's meeting its milestones. So you can just describe that. Current and future maintenance plans, many times these projects are done in phases. And so you're applying for a grant to help you complete, you know, one phase of something that might take years to get to the finish line. And so you're just going to describe here what work you may have already completed to get you to this point. And then once the, you know, the grant replaces the roof or whatever you're requesting, what are you going to do to make sure that that's maintained and you, complete other improvements to the property. Already mentioned the deed, so I don't think there's anything more to add there. And then getting into the budget, this is where you get into the details of what you need to have done or what you want to have done and what the cost is estimated to be. And the application allows you to break down the work in 6 places. Like there's 6 different items that you can complete. And you don't have to do all 6, but for example, let's say that you want to, there's 3 main things you want to get done. You want to replace the roof. You want to repair the gutters. They might be the old-fashioned box gutters, or you might need to replace the hanging gutters. And then while you're up there on that roof, you also want to repoint the chimney. And so you probably want to break those out into 3 different items. And you would describe each one. You'd have photographs showing each one of those. And then you would have the estimate cost of what each one would be and break that into what you're requesting for the grant and what your matching funds would be. The development grant is a 50-50 match. So you can have more matching funds. Let's say you're asking for $10,000 worth of grant, you're going to put up $15,000 worth of matching funds. That's okay, but your grant can't be more than 50% of the overall cost of that item. Your attachments, in addition to the photographs, it could be plan drawings or specifications for the materials. Sometimes that's just something that you've copied out of, the materials that you're going to order online. You're just supplying us with copies of what those are. It gives the specifications regarding like the sizes and the description, and often has a picture to show what it's going to look like. Your contractor's estimates for each of these steps, and so forth. Since you're not necessarily going to use all 6 items, fill them all out. That means if you're only submitting for the 3 things I mentioned, the roof, the chimneys, and the gutters, that's 3. The other 3 that you're not filling out, you can take advantage of those uploads if you've got more photographs or more documents that you need to share with us to give us a good understanding of the project. The matching share. So as I mentioned, it's a 50-50 match. So basically, if you put $1 into the project, we'll match $1. Currently, the development grants, the limit is $50,000. So if you had a $100,000 project, we could match up to $50,000 of it. There's some flexibility in that amount. It depends upon the availability of funds. So depending upon what the legislature would appropriate for this program, and also how many grant applications we receive. It is a competitive grant, and we do try to stretch the funds as far as we can. But what could happen is, as I mentioned a minute ago, let's say that you ask for 3 different items in your grant. If we cannot fully fund it, we may partially fund it. And we try to do that with some logic. But in the example I gave you, we may be able to cover the cost of the roof and the gutters, but we might not be able to fund the part that was for the repointing of the chimney. But that's, we look at each one on a case-by-case basis, and we also try to prioritize, as Claire said in the beginning, the majority of these grants are devoted to the exteriors of buildings, and one of our main priorities is to keep water from getting in the building. So roofs and gutters, things like that, are a higher priority than something else that might be important, but maybe less urgent, I guess is the word I'm looking for. On the matching amounts, well, the next slide I think gets in the budget, so we'll talk about that here. Actually, I got ahead of myself. So just to back up a little bit, on the budget part of it, you do also have to demonstrate that you have the funds to cover the entire cost of the project. Even though we are going to be matching it, you have to show upfront, because this is a reimbursement. You have to pay your contractor and then submit to us an invoice so that we can reimburse you for 50% of what you paid your contractor. So we have received some questions about, like, what do I need to show that? And typically it's bank statements, or you might have a line of credit or a building loan that you can draw against, but you have to be able to demonstrate that you can cover the entire cost, even though you're going to get reimbursed. The matching share, it also talks about staff time and volunteer time and donated materials. So if you have, let's say, maybe there's some demo work that has to be done before you actually get into the repairs that you're wanting to do, and you've got someone who has access to the equipment and everything, they do this, but they're willing to donate their time to your project, you can actually use that as part of your matching share. Or if you have volunteers that, they're not going to get paid, but they're going to help you out, you can count their time, and that's calculated at, the state's minimum wage, which is currently $8.75 an hour. Or if you have a company that's going to donate materials, or if you have available materials, you can submit the cost of those, even though you're not having to pay for them because they're donated, but they can be part of your match. At least 50% of the matching funds has to be in cash, though. So if you are going to use some of the volunteer or staff time or donated materials, it cannot be more than half of your matching funds. Okay, sorry, Claire. Now we can get to this one. Not very common for development grants. Do people have to have a consultant like a structural engineer or an architect involved? We see that more often when we're looking at our survey and planning grants. But if you're doing some major structural work, to a property, and sometimes that's the first thing people get into, often when they're restoring a property, we may require that because of the nature of the work that's going to have to be done. And this is where you can upload, those specs or the structural engineer's report. And then this is also where you sign off. And if the grant application is for an organization, as Susan described in the beginning, the president or the chairperson of that organization is the one that signs off. Susan showed before you would submit the application, there's a link to this document, the assurances that you have to open and sign off on. And it has like 19 different areas. Many of those are within the Department of Interior standards, and many of them we are covered within the application. But I'll point out a few of them here because they're more common to be questioned. And the first one is a covenant. And so when you receive these funds to, do the work on your property, you have to get a covenant that, depending upon the amount of the grant, if it's up to $50,000, the covenant would be for 5 years. If it's more than $50,000, it would be 10 years. And it's to show that you're not going to do subsequent work to the property that's going to not adhere to those Department of Interior standards. If you've done a covenant before, there's probably no question about this. Years ago, when I had to get one, I ran around a lot within our city hall before I finally found the right person to help me. So if you have questions about that, get a hold of me and I'll help you. Maintain the engineering supervision at the construction site if applicable. Again, that's not typically the case for a development grant, but in some cases it is. Complete the work within specified time frame. As I mentioned, this grant that you're applying for is July 1 through June 30th of next year. But, you know, if you would run into something, sometimes there are unforeseen things, you know, you're getting close to the deadline and the material didn't come in or something happened, you can contact us and we can request a change order to, you know, add another month or two onto the project. We don't love to do that, but sometimes it's necessary. We understand. Comply with lead-based paint poisoning prevention act. That's primarily for, you'll see, if you look that up, it's going to talk about the use of lead-based products in your work, which is very unlikely since they don't manufacture lead-based paint. Currently, if you are doing any kind of, you know, scraping or sanding, you want to make sure that you take proper precautions that your contractor would during that process. If applicable, comply with flood insurance requirements. And then also there's a reference on the assurances page to audits. And this applies to organizations. So if you're an individual applying for a grant, this isn't applicable. But if you're an organization applying for the grant, and often it's like, you know, the city of Charleston or, you know, something like that, you are required to have an independent audit of the grant through a licensed certified public accountant. And it's many times those organizations, when they have their annual audit of the organization, they just provide us with that because it includes the grant funds. And then once you have completed the application, and again, you might want to go back and just take another look at that checklist to make sure you got it all covered. When you have it all done and you have signed off on the assurances document and uploaded it, then the submit button's at the bottom of the screen.
All right. So we thought it might be helpful if you had an idea of the complete grant timeline. So from submission until project closeout. You know, some of these dates are subject to adjustment, but these next couple of slides will give you a rough idea of how long the entire process will take. So grant applications are due March 31st, once again, by 11:30 p.m. If you have any questions about the application or would like us to review a draft, we are more than happy to assist. We do ask that if you want us to comment on a draft, that you have those submitted to our office by 5 p.m. on March 24th to give us time to get you, you know, proper feedback. Then throughout the month of April, we'll be reviewing all applications. During this time, we will notify applicants of simple errors or omissions and allow that to be corrected so that the application can be fully processed by our outside review panel, which I'll talk about here in a second. Also during this time, our office will be making recommendations. As Randy said earlier, development grant funds are limited, and so our office reserves the right to not recommend funding for projects that have received grants for 2 consecutive years or have received more than $50,000 in the last 3 years. And we'll make the note of that before passing the application on to our independent review panel. This review panel may include people like architects, historians, members of Historic Landmarks Commission, city planning staff, etc. They will review and score the applications individually and then meet and discuss them together. And projects will be prioritized during this meeting. If a panelist has a conflict of interest, they will be recused from scoring specific applications. After this, applications are then submitted to both the Archives and History Commission and finally onto the governor's office. The Archives and History Commission meets in June, and so so the governor's approval and notification to applicants occurs just before or sometimes after July 1st. After notification of approval, grantees are required to attend a grant orientation session. Prior to orientation, grantees will receive a binder that contains information, examples of required documents such as the covenant, the request for quotation, and forms like our invoice and monthly progress report form. The virtual orientation will then review all of the requirements for completing this grant and those documents. By the end of August, grantees must have a contract signed with our office, provide a covenant, and submit a W-9. Grant funds cannot be used to reimburse for materials obtained or work completed prior to the date on that contract. And then also the W-9 is necessary for SHPO issuing payment. Grant reimbursement checks, a note about that, are that they're not subject to income tax. The RFQ, bid expectations, and contracts are all items that will go into more detail once you've been awarded the grant and attend the orientation. And further guidance is provided in the grant manual, but you'll be completing them, starting in August and into early December. Once grants are awarded, grantees in our office should be in regular communication. Part of this communication is a monthly status report where grantees summarize their work during the previous month, and you will also report any expenditures made during this time. The final one of these reports, as well as pictures of completed work, must be submitted to our office by September 30th, 2026 in order to receive any final payment, and all final payments must be made around that date. We do have a question in the chat, and I'll go ahead and read that out if anybody would like to answer. Do materials such as lumber, mortar, hardware have to be detailed in the cost estimate? Randy, you have to unmute again.
All right, a detailed estimate is good, but for the purposes of the application, the estimate is to support the amount that you're requesting. So, if you don't have every single nail and item listed, that's okay. If you would be awarded the grant, that's when you're actually going to put the work out for bid, and you're going to receive, bids from contractors that are going to get into those details. So the estimate that you're attaching to the application would be less detailed than the one that you're actually going to get from the contractor who will ultimately wind up doing the work.
All right, we have a question from Joseph. For the file size limitation, can a zip file be used?
No, only PDFs. No zip files. If you we're trying to get you to, then if it's 85 pages, then yes. What will happen is you'll have I call it a holding document where the deed goes, and then once you've submitted the application, I can send you a SharePoint folder, a Microsoft SharePoint folder, and you can drop your zipped folder in there, and we'll get it into the application. Okay. You're welcome.